Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this Clown Decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better. And today it's going to be another video on how we are all disappointed but not surprised at decisions the Labour Party are making. And today we start off with a bit of a reminder of a particular thing said by Keir Starmer in one of yesterday's videos. Tell me, Sir Starmer, what do you think of people who are demanding a national inquiry into one of the biggest state scandals that the British have ever seen?
And when politicians, and I mean politicians, who sat in government for many years, are casual about honesty, decency, truth, and the rule of law, calling for inquiries because they want to jump on a bandwagon of the far right, then that affects politics, because a robust debate can only be based on the true facts.
Yes, yesterday Keir Starmer decided to say that wanting a national inquiry into, as I say, the biggest scandal that the British people have seen probably ever. Either way, it's a very big one. Apparently that's just jumping on a far-right bandwagon. And this was such a remarkably stupid thing to say that the PM's official spokesperson had to clarify that Keir Starmer was not labelling anyone who is calling for a national inquiry into the child grooming scandal far-right. Just the politicians. So people like you and me, we're not far-right, but people like Robert Jenrick, yeah, totally a far-right moron. According to Sir Keir Starmer, who is one of the most unpopular prime ministers ever at this point. The spokesman declines to say if the PM was talking about the Shadow Justice Secretary, Robert Jenrick, but he obviously was. Anyway, given it was a Monday yesterday, Parliament was indeed sitting, and the issue of whether there should be an inquiry or not was obviously on the agenda for Parliament debates. And I'm going to start off with about the only good point that anyone from Labour made on this issue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I just first of all say, it seems to be the Conservative line across the board now that says, you had 14 years in opposition. Why haven't you sorted it all out in 6 months? Can I just gently say, you had 14 years in government. It'll take longer than 6 months to clean up your mess. Or the party opposite's mess, I should say, Mr. Speaker. Certainly not your mess. But
yeah, and I'll be honest, this is a fair point when it comes to this particular issue. Now, this wasn't necessarily about the grooming gang inquiry, however, he is making the point that the Tories were pretty atrocious for 14 years, and obviously with the inquiry being a topic of the day, it is a reasonable question of why are an awful lot of Tories all of a sudden demanding this inquiry when they had 14 years to actually push one themselves? The answer is it's because the Tory party is full of incompetent morons mainly thanks to, I should say, David Cameron's A-list, which effectively allowed literally anyone to join the Conservative Party to try and become an MP. There has been the odd good MP through that A-list. Most of them were terrible. Rory Stewart was an A-lister, that's all I have to say about that. Anyway, despite all this, the Tories are right to push for this inquiry, and generally they are met in Parliament with a very, very dismissive reaction.
One of the most shocking details of the rape gangs is the evidence of collusion and corruption among police officers, social workers and local councillors.
I will say I do always prefer when they use the term rape gang rather than grooming gang. Grooming gang is a very sanitised word that is effectively put forward so that effectively we can publish all this, but it is much more accurate to call them rape gangs for pretty obvious reasons.
Will the Home Secretary commit today to establishing a unit in the NCA dedicated to investigating not only the untried perpetrators, but the police officers, social workers and local councillors complicit in these disgusting crimes?
Nothing but reasonable requests there. This was a lot more than just some gangs going around grooming and raping young girls. It was also made entirely possible and was allowed to carry on for literally decades because of the unwillingness of, as he says, councillors, social workers and police officers to actually do anything about the issue. They are complicit in the crimes, obviously they should be part of the inquiry and naturally punished on from there.
Home Secretary.
Well, the honourable member makes an important point, which is that alongside the issues around pursuing the perpetrators, which always has to be the greatest priority, because that is about protecting victims and making sure those who commit vile crimes face justice.
Yeah, this speech effectively ends up just being a load of platitudes.
There also has to be a responsibility on people for their own public roles, whether that be in policing, in local councils, but also in other institutions, as we've seen issues around the Church of England, issues around the Catholic Church and other institutions that were investigated as part of the inquiry.
I always do find it quite funny how it's... Don't get me wrong, I understand how the churches were also complicit in covering up their own very dirty laundry when it came to molesting boys. However, I just find it quite funny that it's only Christian institutions here when it would be different institutions that were covering up the rape gangs in Rotherham, let's say. Anyway, at this point, I'm sure to you, it sounds like that she's effectively agreeing with Nick Timothy here, that the inquiry should expand to just beyond the people who directly groomed and molested these girls.
But one of the reasons that we are so keen to change the law, and indeed it's something that I raised back when he was working in the Home Office, was the importance of changing the law on the duty to report, is that is what then makes it an offence if you have public officials who are covering up or who are failing to report. And that's why it's so important that we do that, so we can have proper accountability as well.
Just to make it 100% clear, that was effectively a refusal to set up a National Crime Agency unit to investigate not just untried gang members, but also social workers, counsellors and police officers, etc. Though she was vaguely talking about changing the law, but it was basically a non-answer and deflection, as is usually the case with Labour. But luckily there was such obfuscation there that is not quite as enraging as when Labour are just directly saying that absolutely nobody should be standing up for victims of mass rape. And I mean that. Watch this clip.
Just say, in that vein, a word on the Prime Minister's comments this morning. It is not far right to stand up for victims of mass rape. And smearing people.
Order.
It's those concerns.
Shadows.
Yeah, that was a bunch of Labour MPs shouting shame and booing a man, saying it is not far right to stand up for victims of rape. Honestly, the most charitable I can be here is saying, oh, they're saying shame because he's misrepresenting what the Prime Minister said. But given that the Prime Minister's spokesperson had to actually clarify what he said, because it was so ridiculous, it is my opinion that is probably too charitable. But yes, they have to get told off by the Deputy Speaker because they are interrupting Shadow Home Secretary Chris Phillip, pointing out that standing up for victims of mass rape is actually a good thing.
People want to hear the statement. Chris Phil.
Smearing people who raise those issues is exactly how this ended up getting covered up in the first place.
Absolutely great way to end it, and entirely true. And while in this debate, according to Nick Timothy, in the House of Commons when Chris Phillip asked the government to publish more data on the ethnicity of child rapists, apparently some Labour MPs shouted why. Labour have learned nothing, they will learn nothing, and the quicker we can kick them out of government, the better. And the Conservatives will also force a vote in Parliament on Wednesday demanding a full inquiry into the grooming gang scandal. Credit where it's due, the Tories are being incredibly good here. I have absolutely no complaints for what they have done on this issue since it has got to Parliament, from the comments and demands that they have made. It does need to be pointed out, though, that Kemi Badenoch is absolutely nowhere to be seen as far as I'm aware. And obviously, Reform are fully backing the Conservatives on this crusade of theirs, which is absolutely amazing. This is generally how we are going to actually see effective right-wing change when it comes to this particular Parliament. It is when the Tories and Reform actually coincide with the same objectives. And hopefully with someone like Robert Jenrick, who is clearly influencing the right wing of the Tory party, you'll probably see an awful lot of that actually happening, because let's just face it, Kemi Badenoch is so bad that the only way she will do any good is by effectively following that line of inquiry too. But it is also worth noting that hopefully this vote will actually be put forward to the House. And from there we can see, I imagine the Tories are all going to vote for it, Reform are obviously going to vote for it, but every other party, bit of a toss-up. Anyone who votes against it, I think their name needs to be put on a list and that needs to be made public. And from there, we need to make it clear to people that if you vote this person in again, then you are voting someone in who is happy to try and cover up the evil that we've been talking about for this week, and the evil that carried on for decades. Anyway, because I tend to give fair analysis, this video really is turning into, hey, the Tories are doing okay here. In fact, they're doing pretty good. And as I said before, Robert Jenrick is really the right-wing vanguard within the Tory party at the moment. I have absolutely no issues with him. I just kind of think that he needs to keep pushing the Tory party right, and if it refuses to, basically move over to Reform. But I can't see that happening for some years, and there is every possibility that it doesn't happen until after the next election. But seriously, I am nothing short of impressed. Here he is on GB News.
You posted on X at the weekend, didn't you, saying that this scandal started with the onset of mass migration, importing hundreds of thousands of people from alien cultures. A controversial statement.
Well, I mean, as time goes on, it becomes less and less and less controversial. But honestly, anyone that ever said GB News was a net negative, anyone who said that the Tories are irredeemable, it's clearly all not true. I don't think the Tories are irredeemable, I think they're just full of useless left-wingers. But as shown in this video, there are clearly still some people in there, in fact it might even be the majority of MPs for all I know, who are understanding that there is a shift in popular politics and are clearly trying to capture that. I mean, seriously, I am fully backing Reform to move the Tories to the right, because at the end of the day there's a reason they're the oldest political party in the world, and they need an internal revolution to effectively become what Reform is now. And you will likely see a huge improvement to the country when that eventually happens, if that eventually happens. Reform absolutely need to still exist, and they still need to put pressure on the right to them, and this appears to be the result. Nothing short of good to see it.
Yes, absolutely. Look, we have seen millions of people enter the UK in recent years, and some of them have backward, frankly, medieval attitudes to women. We're talking here about thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of vulnerable young girls being tortured and raped. I will not disguise or sanitize my language simply to ensure that some people are not offended. We must ensure that we speak the truth and are brave in this situation.
As I say, nothing short of impressed. This is what all of Reform say, this is what the right wing of the Tory party say, this is what Tory members generally say. But I wouldn't be a Reform activist if I didn't also mention that Reform are clearly on the side of Jenrick and the right wing of the Tory party as well. And in fact, Reform are going one step further. Sebastian Payne points out that the Times have called for a new national inquiry onto the grooming gangs, and Nigel Farage quote tweets this saying, "If the Labour government won't hold a full public inquiry into the widespread mass rape scandal, then we at Reform UK will. Raising money won't be a problem." Now, this is either due to the billionaire donor class, or much more likely even, despite Elon Musk being a bit tismy this week, there is every possibility that it is actually Elon Musk's money that will be directly given to Reform to then be spent on this inquiry that they are demanding. Which again is very much worth pointing out that 5 Reform MPs are doing better than hundreds of Tory MPs that existed in the House for 14 years. And it has taken them to nearly collapse to finally get the message. And don't get me wrong, I am a bit sentimental about the Tories and would like them to move to the right to actually survive this political revolution, and there's every chance that they will actually do it. But at the end of the day, this is all being largely made possible because of the right-wing pressure from Reform as well. The Tories being the only right-wing party generally wasn't really helpful trying to keep them to the right, and that's why they all ended up moving left, such as Boris Johnson, especially David Cameron, Theresa May, etc, etc, etc. Liz Truss tries to do it vaguely, and what do you get? She gets kicked out. But you have Reform in there, who are a small opposition party, but can clearly put pressure on the government by Rupert Lowe constantly writing to the Home Secretary for data and information on subjects such as the grooming gang, etc. Richard Tice going on about businesses failing due to the budget and things like that. Nigel Farage doing the Reform leader stuff as well as outside of Parliament as well as in it. It's all grand stuff. And stuff like this, stuff like privately prosecuting those Manchester airport attackers. These are examples where, clearly coming from the business world, they have a different mindset to these professional politicians. And given that generally being a businessman generally makes you right-wing, being an entrepreneur is more of a left-wing position because you're trying to be creatively destructive. Being a businessman, you're trying to keep something going. This is why they have a more authentic right-wing mindset, unlike someone like, say, Boris Johnson. So as I say, while the Tories are moving right, let's bear in mind that Reform were already there when they got into Parliament. Again, I don't want to take away from Robert Jenrick, because I do really like him, and the other MPs that we have had in this video today, but I'm a Reform simp, what can I say? They are doing very good work, as are some of the Tories. And hopefully they keep pressure on this subject, because clearly there is a massive appetite to see heads roll. Anyway, this issue is such an embarrassing one for Labour that one of the BBC's flagship political shows, Victoria Derbyshire, which typically BBC, quite left-wing, is in the business of gotcha questions, actually had a really easy time putting forward gotcha questions to Labour. This is how embarrassing Labour are at the moment. Just watch this clip.
Got the Alexis J report with a set of very solid recommendations.
Are people jumping on the far-right bandwagon if they want a national independent inquiry?
I think those people need to explain why we need another review and inquiry. We've had the local reviews and inquiries. We've had the J reviews and inquiries. Let's get on and implement those. Of course, we monitor, we're vigilant. If we see that the implementation of those measures is not working for some reason, then okay, yeah, we may need to go back to the drawing board. But let's get on with what's on the table. And it's frankly shameful that those recommendations have been there since 2022 and they've never been implemented.
Just to translate that deflection, effectively what he said there is, when asked, is everyone asking for a national inquiry a far-right agitator? He obviously said, well, they need to give me a good reason to have that. And then goes through all these local council inquiries that have happened, which there have been a few. The thing is that I think the National Labour Party here are effectively trying to throw some of their local Labour councils under the bus. This Labour government especially are going to want to avoid a national inquiry for a few reasons. One of the main ones being is that some of the MPs are probably complicit in this and having a national inquiry that goes actually above the council levels, like the local inquiries couldn't do, is going to lead to an awful lot of MPs having an awful lot of egg on their face and, as I say, probably their heads rolling.
We've spoken to a victim today who says she was sexually exploited as a teenager in Telford. She wants a national inquiry because she believes it will hold people accountable in the way previous inquiries haven't. Is she jumping on the far-right bandwagon?
I think that the J review was very clear that they will put institutions in place, Child Protection Authority.
You're ignoring my question again.
I suppose in a way I am very glad to see that a lot of political interviewers are just calling out the ridiculous tactic that a lot of politicians actually learn through their media training when they become an MP, where effectively, yeah, they just ignore questions. And it's why Nigel Farage is quite a bit of fresh air, because he is the type of person who will just answer questions directly. Whereas obviously here, every time it's a deflection, it's, oh, well, we've already had inquiries. No, that wasn't asked. I am directly asking you, is this grooming gang survivor demanding a national inquiry far right? And he just won't answer it.
Those institutions will, I believe, deliver on what that young person, that victim of abuse, is calling for. I believe that the J inquiry, we believe as a government, they will deliver on what is needed.
Is she jumping on the far-right bandwagon?
Victoria Derbyshire, unironically, is pretty much all of us when it comes to Labour at the moment. Please stop obfuscating, just answer the goddamn question.
We need to be very vigilant and make sure that we're putting the measures in place that work.
Is she jumping on the far-right bandwagon, yes or no?
It's heartbreaking to see these awful, sickening cases of abuse.
I'm not sure why you can't answer my question.
I think that people who are victims of this abuse are well within their rights to call for all of the measures that need to be taken.
So she's not jumping on a far-right bandwagon?
It's our job as a government. I don't think that that's what the Prime Minister was saying.
I mean, it took a painful amount of time to get to that point. And it took him that long to effectively get to the official PM spokesman's point, which is that, oh no, I'm clearly only talking about politicians, which is actually quite good for us, because that means that us commentators and us YouTube commenters and chat and whatever, people on Twitter, whatever you want to say, can't call us far right then. They were only talking about politicians, so we can demand it to our heart's content. But as I say, this has been such an embarrassing episode for Labour that even the BBC even the BBC are having a really easy time effectively bullying Labour MPs. But with all that, we have our answer. Yes, we have had a few local inquiries at the council level, but obviously the point now is that we want it on a national level because it is a national issue. It's not just a problem for a few councils. It seems to be one that goes throughout the United Kingdom, by the way. Some issues have happened in Glasgow. There's probably been some in Wales as well. It's endemic. It's mostly focused on northern towns, but hell, it's happened in Oxford, Glasgow, as I just said. It's all over the place. This is the sort of thing that can't be covered up without it going to the top. People instinctively suspect that. So what is the problem with having a national inquiry? Well, I don't know. Labour have not given us a satisfactory answer on that. Yes, there have been some at the local level. That's good work. Have any of the people involved been arrested and faced a trial? No. So it's not the sort of thing we can trust. So have a national one. Anyone who is involved in the cover-up or allowed this evil to happen, yes, they should be tried and punished, as well as the people directly involved in the grooming, rape and molestation. That is where the right wing of the Tory party and Reform are at. That is probably what we are going to see a lot of pressure pushing for over the next few weeks. Are Labour going to try and stop it? Well, as we can see, they obviously are. Does that make them terrible? Well, we already knew they were terrible. So, yeah, there we go. I think that's everything we have to say on this now. So, shill time. Tonight, we will be having a Tosh Talks where me and a panel over on the Worcester Club, the panel including John, Tharium and Cero, we will be discussing predictions for 2025 and putting them on a bingo card to make entertainment for people over in the Worcester Club to see how accurate as a group we are. So do come along to that. I will be announcing that on Twitter and YouTube, of course, as well. Laughing at the Guardian will return next Saturday as well, of course, and the Antiquity stream, I know a few of you are big fans of that, probably won't be returning till February. Videos from me out as and when I can make them. As I say, they're pretty much daily at this point, especially during weekdays. If you are a fan of what I do, my work over on Twitter, YouTube and the Worcester Club, best thing you can do is follow me there, subscribe to me here, subscribe to the Worcester Club. If you really like my work, you can always become a member, and you can also give super chats and super thanks. That really helps the channel grow as well and keeps me doing what I'm doing. And it's been made quite clear to me that even though there are disagreements with some of my subscribers over some of my analysis, that's absolutely fine. And to be honest, that is definitely showing me that I am resilient to audience capture, which is exactly what I want, because I don't just want to give you what you necessarily want to hear, because, well, we're all different people and it's good to have disagreements over these things. But anyway, I won't keep you any longer than I need to. So that was everything I had for you for today. So once again, thank you very much for watching. Until next time, goodbye.